Welcome back to the Deep Dive. For those of you who've been with us, we've spent a lot of time laying the groundwork here. We've mapped out the devastating timeline, the victims, the financial wreckage Daniel Martin left behind.
Right, the emotional fallout was just immense. And critically, we didn't just stop at one man's story. In our last deep dive, we really widened the lens.
We did. We drew that really unmistakable parallel between Daniel Martin and, one of the most infamous serial con artists out there, Duty John Meehan.
And the similarities were they were too precise to be a coincidence. Despite the decades, the different locations, you saw this distinct repeating pattern. Manufactured identities, financial exploitation, manipulation. It just spanned years and dozens of lives.
And that brings us to today, because we're drilling right down into the bedrock of that pattern. The question that just hangs over all of this, the one that causes so much pain and confusion is, how? How does one man repeat the exact same script with so many different people? I mean, we're talking about women of all different ages, backgrounds, professional successes, scattered across states. How does this predictable blueprint just keep working?
It's because it's not just a series of bad acts or, poor morality that would be chaotic. What we're actually tracking is a specific, pervasive, and this is the key word, predictable clinical script.
A script.
Exactly. To really get at the mechanics of it all, we have to go inside the psychology. We have to define the disorder and deconstruct the blueprint that men like Daniel Martin and Dirty John follow almost to the letter.
So the individual changes, but the playbook, it's fixed.
It's fixed. That's why the repetition is so consistent.
Well, this deep dive is called The Narcissist Blueprint, Why Serial Con Artists All Look the Same. We are going to break down the psychological machine here, and I promise you, once you understand the architecture of this con, you will never look at manipulation or those sudden, intense red flags the same way again. Okay, so let's start with the sheer scale of the repetition, because the scale is, I think, the core piece of evidence we have. This isn't just one terrible breakup we're analyzing.
No, not at all. This is an operational system. It required a whole roster of targets, a rotating cast, just to keep running.
You really do have to list the scope, don't you? Because without it, someone could just dismiss this as, bad dating.
Exactly. But when you see the breadth of it, you realize this is a methodology. It's carefully orchestrated. The goal is always extraction, never, ever connection.
Right. So just think back to the roster of victims from Daniel Martin's case. Jessica, who was just drained emotionally and financially. Deborah, who he hit up for huge sums of cash, not once, but twice. Hillary, whose signature led to that overwhelming $1.3 million judgment. Megan, who got pulled into his fake construction businesses.
And it goes on.
It does. B, who he used for bond money when he, inevitably got into legal trouble. Sasha, who was one of the early ones. And then there are the specific cases, like the Franklin County homeowner, the divorced friend, tangled in his legal fictions.
And the TikTok roster, we can't forget them.
Yeah.
Women across 4 different states who all started reporting the same patterns once he was exposed.
And maybe the most chilling of all, targeting a cancer patient.
It's just the vulnerability there is staggering. And what stands out to me when you list them all out like that is the diversity.
Totally.
Different ages, different economic backgrounds, living in completely different places. A normal person would change their approach, But for him, the targets change. But the script, it's just astonishingly rigid. It's like watching the same play with a different cast every night.
That's a perfect way to put it. The victim changes. But the method, the mechanism of engagement is identical every single time. It always starts with that dizzying speed of connection, what we call love bombing.
Right. The excessive praise, the constant attention, the immediate declarations that you're the one.
And it's designed to just overload your system, right?
It is. It's meant to bypass your rational, healthy vetting process. If I can overwhelm you with adoration, you stop using logic and you start operating on pure feeling. And that's the moment the mirroring begins.
So he's not showing you who he is.
No, he's showing you who you are, or rather, what you need. He becomes the perfect puzzle piece to fill whatever emotional vacuum you have. And that creates this sense of, intense, undeniable familiarity.
That twin flame connection people talk about.
Exactly. And it's just psychological shorthand for accelerating trust to a really unsafe degree.
And once that trust is there, the momentum just never stops. It goes right into future faking.
And this isn't just, maybe someday will. It's detailed. Elaborate discussions about marriage, buying a house, launching some grand business together.
It binds the victim to a future that doesn't actually exist.
Yes, it makes you emotionally invested in keeping the whole thing alive. You have to protect that fictional future.
And right after that high comes the low, doesn't it? The trauma dumping.
Oh, absolutely. The fabricated, dramatic stories of immense hardship, a terrible injury, an unfair lawsuit. These stories are specifically designed to trigger sympathy, to make the victim feel protective.
To make them think, this incredible, powerful man, he needs me.
Precisely. And that emotional roller coaster is the perfect setup for the final steps.
Mm.
Isolation and financial entanglement.
He pulls you away from anyone who might say, hey, wait a second, that sounds off.
And then the financial part, whether it's a small loan or a huge credit scheme, makes you materially invested. Now you're trapped. You can't get out.
So what holds this all together? What keeps the script running across all these different women at the same time?
An inventory of lies, a web of fabrication so vast and so layered, it covers every single aspect of his life. He lied about his wealth, his careers.
He was a construction mogul one week, running for office the next.
Right. He lied about his injuries, the lawsuits, his mother, his exes. The sources just say he lied about everything.
The sheer scope of it tells you that the person they met wasn't just a person with some bad habits. He was a fictional character.
Yeah.
An avatar built for one purpose: exploitation.
He couldn't afford to tell the truth. The real him, the lack of wealth, the instability, the criminal record, that was a threat to his goal, so he replaced it completely.
And here's the part that I just can't get my head around, the really chilling insight. Every single victim, no matter how smart or successful, genuinely believed they were the only one.
They had to believe that. They thought the drama, the urgency, the intensity, it was all unique to their story. The con artist has to maintain that illusion of being the chosen one.
So that repetition is definitive proof. I mean, if you have 15, 20 people, all independently reporting the same exact sequence, love bombing, trauma dumping, financial urgency, isolation, it's not a coincidence anymore.
It's an SOP and standard operating procedure. If any of those victims knew they were just part of a rotation, the whole supply chain would just crumble instantly. The blueprint demands secrecy and scale.
Okay, so if the pattern is the evidence, then the disorder is what's driving it all. Let's get clinical for a second and formally define what we're talking about. We use the term NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, a lot. But I think in popular culture, it's been really watered down. It just means someone who's arrogant or takes too many selfies.
That distinction is so important. We are not talking about someone who's just confident or likes a bit of attention. We're talking about a clinical personality disorder. The psychological community defines it as a pervasive, stable pattern of behavior that deviates from cultural norms and leads to, real distress or impairment.
And it's fundamentally an identity disorder, right?
Yeah.
Rooted in an unstable sense of self.
Unstable is the key word, yes. The entire con artist persona is a fortress built to protect that fragile, shaky, core identity.
So what are the specific clinical traits we see again and again in these high-level exploiters like Daniel Martin?
Well, it's really a cluster of traits. You need all of them to paint the full picture. First, there's grandiosity, this inflated, almost delusional sense of self-importance. They don't just feel important, they believe they are uniquely brilliant, destined for greatness.
Okay.
Second, a pervasive need for admiration. Constant praise and attention aren't just things they want, they are essential. It's sustenance. We call it narcissistic supply.
And if that supply gets threatened or cut off, that's when the mask starts to slip and things get dangerous.
Absolutely. The third, and this is a big one, is a profound lack of empathy. The complete inability to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of other people. This is what makes the cruelty possible.
It's a total blind spot.
A total blind spot. Then you have a strong sense of entitlement, the belief that they deserve special treatment, and that rules just don't apply to them. They engage in exploitative behavior, using others purely as instruments for personal gain without any guilt. Then there's intense envy, which masks a deep insecurity. And finally, you have this overt arrogance, which is paired with that very fragile, unstable sense of self that makes the whole fake persona necessary in the first place.
What's so powerful about that list is when you read it, you realize it's not just a description of Daniel Martin.
Right.
It's a universal template for almost every serial con artist we ever heard of.
Exactly. You look at John Meehan, Dirty John, the lies about his medical career, the aggressive manipulation of wealthy women, the escalation to violence when he was challenged. It's all textbook NPD traits in action.
And you see the same thing in the financial world, too, with someone like Anna Delvey. The sheer grandiosity of her fake heiress persona, the entitlement to millions of dollars.
The way she exploited her closest friends and major banks, her entire behavior was just geared towards securing the perception of this extraordinary status.
Or Elizabeth Holmes at Theranos.
A perfect example. The absolute refusal to admit failure, even with irrefutable data. The belief that she was destined for greatness despite the science, the exploitation of employees and investors, and a shocking lack of empathy for the patients whose health was on the line.
They all check every single clinical box you just listed. It doesn't matter if it's romance, finance, or tech.
Which just confirms that the con itself is just the vehicle. It's the mechanism they use to achieve their psychological goal, to uphold that grandiose self and keep extracting supply. The con is temporary. The disorder is forever.
Now let's bring this blueprint right down to the local level,
Mhm.
because we have to show that this isn't just some national news phenomenon or a historical case. This blueprint operates everywhere, sometimes the same community at the same time.
This is such a crucial step for anyone listening. It moves the conversation from, talking about these famous cases to recognizing immediate real-world threats in your own backyard.
So in the exact same city where Daniel Martin was operating, Murfreesboro, we've also been documenting the ongoing case of a local realtor, Justin Holder. And when you look at the survivor reports and the serious allegations against him, it's like a shocking echo chamber of the NPD traits we just defined.
This really demonstrates that the pool of individuals with these core traits is much larger than people think. The reports on Holder describe behaviors that sound identical to Martin's methods, even though they're two separate men operating in the same area.
Specifically, we're hearing about emotional manipulation tactics, using these fabricated high-stakes emotional crises to get what he wants or to silence people. There are harassment allegations when his targets tried to leave or expose him. We see that classic grandiosity in his professional claims and this really pronounced sense of entitlement in his personal life, like he's owed compliance.
And most critically, the reports detail emotional exploitation and a profound lack of empathy, especially towards the vulnerable women he allegedly targeted over and over.
Right, these weren't random incidents. They showed a specific targeted focus on people who were susceptible to that kind of manipulation, that intense, rushed intimacy that is so characteristic of the blueprint.
The psychological mechanism is identical. The behavior that drives the manipulation, that grandiose self-belief, objectifying others, using charisma to break down boundaries, it all comes from that same fragile, entitled core.
And we have to stress the critical takeaway here. We are not diagnosing anyone. Justin Holder hasn't been formally diagnosed with NPD, but the goal of tracking these parallel cases, Martin, Dirty John, Holder, is to teach the community to recognize the traits and the patterns in real time.
Because recognition is the only effective defense you have. If you're waiting for a clinical diagnosis from a professional, the con is already running and the damage is probably already done.
You have to focus on the pattern and the impact. Here we have two different men, same city, same time frame, running the same basic blueprint. That consistency is the siren call. It tells you this is a template, not just an individual flaw.
Once you understand the template, you can spot the structure no matter what the cosmetic details are.
Okay, so let's really deconstruct this blueprint. Let's take the 5 primary traits of the serial con artist and just do a deep trait-by-trait analysis. We can see exactly how they show up in Daniel Martin's actions.
Yes. This is what moves us from just acknowledging the pattern to really understanding the psychological machinery behind it.
Let's start where the whole fiction begins. The engine. So, grandiosity. This is the motor that drives the whole fraud operation. It's that inflated sense of self, the almost fantastical delusion of importance. It's this deep belief that they are destined for staggering wealth and unique power.
And that's because the real world just isn't enough for them. It's insufficient, so reality has to be constantly replaced with a spectacular fantasy.
It's a defense mechanism, isn't it?
It's their primary defense mechanism against a deep, deep sense of shame and inadequacy. If they believe they're a multimillionaire construction mogul, they don't have to face the reality that they're, a financially unstable con artist. The delusion is their reality.
The sources are just full of examples of the lengths Martin went to sustain this. The fake multi-million-dollar lawsuits he was always fighting, always painting himself as the wronged, powerful victim.
Yes, or the claims of fake paralysis and these dramatic injuries. They're designed to get sympathy, sure, but also to create awe at his supposed resilience.
These are reality-altering fictions. The fake private jets and Maui beach houses, the vast fake construction empires.
The fake law enforcement careers, the political campaigns he was supposedly running. It was, as you said, fake everything. And it was all necessary to sustain that psychological need to be seen as extraordinary.
So when he's claiming he owns a private jet, the value isn't the jet, which doesn't exist. It's the look of awe he sees in the victim's eyes.
It's the supply, the constant supply generated by being perceived as this spectacular person. Grandiosity is the psychological engine that powers the whole con. He cannot tolerate the shame of being ordinary, so he has to generate spectacular success, even if it's all just a story.
If that engine stops, the whole thing collapses.
Into a void of shame, which they are pathologically driven to avoid at all costs.
So if grandiosity is the engine, then the lack of empathy is. I guess is the component that makes the crash possible. This is the one that's hardest for victims to get their heads around.
It is, because it's the fundamental difference between a neurotypical person and a serial exploiter. Lack of empathy is the inability to genuinely feel guilt, remorse, or the emotional weight of your actions.
So the destruction they cause, the lost savings, the ruined credit, the trauma, it's just what? Collateral damage.
To them, it's just a tolerable expense. It's a line item in their budget for pursuing supply or money. There is no moral stop sign in their brain.
I mean, let's look at the specific consequences Martin left behind. He took $100,000 from Deborah, not just once, but he came back for a second round.
Unbelievable.
He systematically drained Jessica, not just financially, but emotionally, leaving her hollowed out. He exploited Hillary into signing documents that resulted in that staggering $1.3 million judgment.
These actions are so far beyond just standard cruelty. This is clinical indifference. And think about the people he targeted when they were already compromised. The woman battling cancer.
Manipulating women across 4 states at the same time. Stalking Jessica with a tracking device, leaving multiple victims in financial ruin. I mean, this requires a complete shutdown of normal human compassion.
And that explains why victims are left reeling. It's not just the money they lost, it's the realization that the person they loved could inflict so much pain without any visible sign of distress or guilt.
Because the con artist can't care.
They can't. The profound lack of empathy is the disorder that allows these actions to happen, and more importantly, to repeat. If Martin felt real remorse, the blueprint would stop working. He'd be paralyzed by guilt. But since he sees the victim as an object, a tool, destroying the tool when it's no longer useful is just. It's just part of the process.
Okay, so that brings us to the flip side of that fragile ego. The desperate, constant need for admiration. This is why they're so charming at first, isn't it? They need that praise like oxygen.
It's the essential fuel that keeps the engine of grandiosity running. Psychologists call it narcissistic supply. That inflated self is unstable. It's built on a fantasy. It requires constant external validation just to stay airborne and prevent that collapse into shame.
So the initial charm isn't genuine affection. It's a mechanism.
It's a carefully engineered mechanism to extract supply.
In Martin's case, this showed up in really public ways. The aggressive love bombing, the constant bragging about fake wealth, posting fake cooking content to project this stable, desirable image.
Right. And the critical tactic of telling multiple women all at the same time that they were the one.
He needed validation from everywhere, didn't he?
From every possible source. Not just the women he was conning for money, but from his whole network. The sources say he even manipulated his own mother to validate his lies or get sympathy for his fake crises.
So he's leveraging even the most sacred relationships for supply.
Yes. And that phrase we heard earlier, collecting women like trophies, is a perfect encapsulation of this. Trophies are objects. They exist for display. They prove the owner's status. They don't require any emotional investment back.
The admiration isn't optional for him.
Not at all. It is the essential fuel that sustains his fragile sense of self and keeps the whole blueprint running. When that fuel tank runs low, the grandiosity sputters, and the desperate search for a new source begins immediately. And aggressively.
Which brings us to exploitation. This is where the blueprint becomes really transactional. If grandiosity is the engine and admiration is the fuel, exploitation is the heart of the con. It's viewing every single person as just a tool.
And that's exactly why they need this diverse, rotating cast of characters. They're constantly assessing a potential target. What specific asset do they have? Financial, emotional, professional, that I need right now to move my story forward.
You can just trace this through the victim roster. Jessica wasn't a partner. She was a financial tool.
Systematically drained.
Hillary wasn't a business associate. She was a credit tool, used for loans and signatures. Deborah was a cash tool. used to solve his self-created emergencies.
And Megan was leveraged as a business tool, probably to add credibility to one of his fake construction ventures. B was a bond money tool, providing the cash to get him out of legal trouble. Sasha was an early emotional manipulation tool where he refined his tactics.
And the TikTok roster? The women across 4 states.
They're largely emotional supply tools. They kept the fuel tank full by validating his desirability while he ran the bigger, more expensive cons back home.
The variety of uses just emphasizes how cold and calculated it all is.
Every single victim served a clear, quantifiable purpose. And this brings us to the most dangerous part of the pattern. Once that purpose is fulfilled, or if the victim starts to resist, they are ruthlessly discarded. The tool is just put down, often with incredible cruelty, because they were never seen as a person to begin with.
Okay, so last we have to talk about entitlement. This is the psychological piece that answers the question, how can he look people in the eye and do this?
Yes, entitlement is the unwavering belief that normal rules and societal limits simply do not apply to them. It's the ultimate psychological justification for their entire catalog of destructive actions.
It's a cognitive distortion that turns theft into getting what's mine.
Precisely. They genuinely believe they're a special exception to the rules and are therefore exempt from the moral, ethical, and legal constraints that govern the rest of us. It's the final layer of armor for their identity.
We saw this constantly in Martin's disregard for the law, building unlicensed properties, taking money he didn't earn, lying under oath, violating probation again and again.
He acted as if the legal system was just an inconvenience that he had the right to get around. And even when he was in jail, the entitlement didn't stop. The source material says he was manipulating women from his cell.
Wow.
That shows a complete belief that his needs and his narrative supersede institutional rules, legal boundaries, everything. The jail walls are just another temporary obstacle that he believes he deserves to overcome through manipulation.
He used women to fund his fake lifestyle, because in his mind, he absolutely deserved everything he stole.
Yes, the victims were just temporarily holding assets that actually belonged to him. Entitlement is the psychological justification that lets them sleep at night. Without it, they'd have to see themselves as common criminals and failures, which would shatter their grandiose self. With it, they're just misunderstood geniuses taking what's rightfully theirs.
Okay, we have spent a lot of time deconstructing the perpetrator's blueprint. Now we need to shift the focus entirely to the listener, because this is where the conversation has to become empathetic and instructive. We have to address the shame and the confusion and the self-blame that victims of this blueprint feel.
This pivot is so essential for healing. We have to balance the technical psychology of the con artist with the very real, very painful emotional reality of the survivor. This blueprint is terrifying because it works so well against normal, healthy people who just assume everyone is operating in good faith.
Let's just think about the reality the victims thought they were building. Jessica thought she was building a life, a future. Hillary thought she was entering a legitimate business partnership. Deborah thought she was investing in a home.
Megan thought she was building a future. The sincerity of those hopes is the key. B thought she was helping someone she cared about. Sasha thought she was in a real relationship. The cancer patient thought she was finding safety and care when she was at her most vulnerable.
The gap between the victim's reality and the con artist's reality is it's a massive gulf. And that's where that question, how does I not see it, comes from. And that question is rooted in so much shame.
And we have to answer that question right here, right now, definitively and clearly.
Yeah.
You are not supposed to see it.
Right.
These men are not just average liars, they are professional, highly skilled manipulators. They study people with the intensity of an investigator. They identify your vulnerabilities, your hopes, your unmet needs, and then they craft a persona that fits perfectly into that emotional space.
It's like sophisticated adaptive camouflage.
It is. He doesn't just mirror your favorite color. He mirrors your deepest emotional needs. If you need a stable caregiver, he becomes that. If you need a powerful risk taker, he becomes that. It's camouflage tailored specifically to bypass your critical thinking.
And the high-pressure tactics, the love bombing, the future faking, the trauma dumping, they're all strategic tools.
Yes. Used to rapidly manufacture trust and commitment before your critical faculties can kick in. The con artist is always working at double speed to make sure they secure the target before you can gain any perspective. The cognitive overload is intentional.
So the conclusion here should be liberating for every survivor listening. Once you understand the perpetrator's blueprint, you can stop blaming the victims for falling for it and start focusing on recognizing the pattern, for the sophisticated weapon that it is.
The focus shifts entirely from the victim's perceived failure to the perpetrator's professional, calculated deceit.
Now, the most profound takeaway from all of this is that Daniel Martin is not a one-off. He's not some unique case isolated to one community.
Not at all. John Meehan, Dirty John, was not rare. He wasn't a singular, terrifying event. He was, and he remains, a perfect manifestation of this repeatable, universal blueprint. The pattern is the structure. The individual just steps into the role.
If you compare the evidence on Martin side by side with the documented history of Meehan, the similarities are just chillingly specific. Let's list those exact repeated elements.
Okay. First, the necessity of multiple women in rotation. It's not about infidelity, it's about constant supply, both emotional and financial. Second, the reliance on fake careers and fake identities. For Meehan, the fake doctor. For Martin, the fake construction mogul.
Then there's the calculated use of fake injuries and constant crises to get sympathy and accelerate the bond. Meehan was always having near-death experiences. Martin was always fighting lawsuits or battling paralysis.
The drama is designed to keep the victim in a state of high emotional arousal. And, of course, the foundation. Using fake wealth to establish desirability and power, Meehan pursued it through marriage. Martin just claimed it outright with his jets and businesses.
And the operational sequence is terrifyingly similar. Financial exploitation leads to profound emotional manipulation. And then the final stage, when they're challenged: isolation, control, and escalation.
The narcissist cannot tolerate exposure or abandonment. When the supply is threatened, the mask doesn't just slip, it drops. And the exploitation escalates into vengeance and control. We saw it in Meehan's final violent acts, and we saw it in the stalking and legal retaliation in Martin's history.
So the punchline, the unavoidable truth, is this. The only real difference between Dirty John in California, Daniel Martin in the Southeast, and Anna Delvey in New York City is the zip code.
And the specific details of the fake persona, the underlying psychological architecture, the blueprint, is identical.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, in a practical sense? We've analyzed the psychology, we've exposed the blueprint. Now we have to convert that insight into practical defensive knowledge.
Yes. The goal here is to give you specific, concrete warning signs based on the blueprint. These are the red flags that you should never, ever rationalize away because they signal the deployment of the con artist's opening script.
Okay, here are the behavioral warnings. Please, if you're listening, internalize these. If someone is intensely love-bombing you, rushing the emotional intimacy, overwhelming you with attention and praise and future plans way too soon, that is a massive, immediate red flag.
If someone is aggressively rushing intimacy, talking about marriage or moving in or major financial commitments within weeks or the first few months, you have to stop and ask, what is the rush? The urgency is a function of the con. It's designed to prevent critical thinking.
What about isolation?
If someone is actively and subtly isolating you from your support system, your family, your close friends, that is a critical control tactic. They need you to rely solely on their narrative. Isolation is non-negotiable proof that something is fundamentally wrong.
And this one feels vital, a hard line. If someone is pushing for financial entanglement early, asking for small loans, pitching a business idea that needs your credit or cash,
That is the exploitation trait activating in real time. A new partner's need for your resources is a flashing red light. Full stop.
and finally, the narrative indicators. If someone is constantly lying about their past, telling these wildly dramatic stories of either spectacular success or crippling tragedy, or, just simply if their stories don't add up.
The key instruction here is to trust your gut. Trust that feeling of discomfort. If something feels too good to be true, too fast, too intense, or the drama level is just constantly through the roof, run.
Don't negotiate. Don't try to solve the puzzle. Don't rationalize it away with phrases like, oh, he's just complicated, or he's damaged, I can fix him.
And do not wait for proof, because by the time you have irrefutable proof, the police reports, the fraud documents, the other women, you are already caught in the center of the web. Recognizing the blueprint means acting on the early warning signs. You don't investigate the fire, you leave the building. Immediately.
This has been the deep dive into the narcissist blueprint. We started by focusing on the specific tragedy of Daniel Martin, but we ended with the universal psychology of exploitation. Understanding this blueprint, understanding that the con is a calculated, repeatable script, is the single most powerful tool you have.
We really hope this deep dive provided some clarity and helped turn what can be confusing, overwhelming, painful experiences into something recognizable and predictable. If this helped you see the blueprint more clearly, please share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Start a conversation.
Next time, we are pivoting back to the hard facts and the concrete evidence that ultimately brought this whole persona crashing down. We're following the money, the massive liens, the staggering civil judgments, the criminal indictments, and the sprawling paper trail that absolutely exposes the truth behind the facade.
The paper trail is the one thing the narcissist can never fully fake or control. It's where the fiction ends and the facts begin. Join us for that crucial final step.
Until then, stay aware, stay grounded, and stay loud.